I beg your pardon, sir. You said something was strange, said Mr. Curtin, drumming his fingers upon great, thick book in his lap. I dare say you were referring to the messenger list. Oh, yes, sir, Renee said, then lied. I expected to find my name on it. I've been making perfect scores. That's what I thought, said Mr. Curtin. The minds of children are easily read, even gifted children like yourself, Renard. I'm glad you think I'm gifted, said Renee, sensing an opportunity. I want to become a messenger more than anything. Of course you do, said Mr. Curtin. All of the executives have reported how well you're doing. Both you and your friend George Washington have far exceeded expectations. In fact, in the history of the Institute, no one has ever mastered so much material so quickly. Mr. Curtin's chair had been rolling closer, slowly, almost imperceptibly, so that now their faces were very near to each other. It is a strange coincidence, is it not, that two such gifted children should be admitted to the Institute at the very same time, and that they should be such close friends? Hidden behind those reflexive lenses, Mr. Curtin's expression was difficult to read. Was he suspicious? Renee's heart, already beating double time, kicked into a higher gear. As for being admitted at the same time, he said, that is a coincidence, but it's no surprise that you two are good students, should become good friends, especially if you're roommates. True, said Mr. Curtin with an approving crook of one eyebrow. You are a bright child, a very bright child, Renard, and I believe you would make a fine messenger. Do you believe that yourself? Oh yes, sir, very much, cried Renee, with as much enthusiasm as he could muster. Good, but you must remember, Renard, that you are new. Your time has not yet come, not yet. It will come soon, however, if you are patient. I trust you are capable of patience. I'll do my best, Mr. Curtin. That is all we ask, my boy. I must confess, I am not a patient man myself. Here Mr. Curtin's voice changed. Where it has been briefly paternal and encouraging, it now turned searching. Take, for example, your female friend, the diminutive Miss Contraire. I am losing patience with her. My executives have just reported that although her quiz scores are improving, she remains quite unruly, sleeping during lessons, refusing to speak when questioned, making sour faces at the executives, that sort of thing. Inwardly, Renee groaned. She doesn't seem dedicated, Mr. Curtin went on. Her insolent behavior contradicts her quiz scores. I don't understand her motives. And when I don't understand something, Renard, it is natural that I don't trust it. Perfectly natural, sir, Renee agreed. But you know what they say about people you don't trust. No, said Mr. Curtin, lifting an eyebrow. What do they say? If you don't trust them, keep them close. Mr. Curtin burst out with a screechy laugh that made Renee jump. Keep them close. Very good. There is even more to you than I'd thought, Renard Moldron. Very well. I'll keep her close, as you do, and perhaps one day she will prove useful. Perhaps so, Renee said. He had a distinct feeling that something between them had changed, as if he had passed a test I didn't know I was taking, he thought, with a curious sense of déjà vu. Yes, keep them close, said Curtin, stroking his chin. He seemed to be considering something. Yes, that is the best way to control the problem. And control is the key, my boy. Never forget that. Control is always the key. No, sir, said Renee. I won't forget. Mr. Curtin smiled. Very well, Renard. I've decided something. I should like to speak with your father. Come with me to my office, won't you? Step along quickly now. I hate to waste time getting from one place to the next. And spinning in his chair about, Mr. Curtin rocketed from the room. Renee hesitated only long enough to take a deep, deep breath and then hurried after him. Mr. Curtin did hate to waste time. Renee had run to keep up with him. Through the empty corridors and across the cafeteria, where the helpers were busy preparing supper, Mr. Curtin never slowed. Not even when he approached his door into the plaza, slamming it open with the front of his chair and scattering frightened students left and right. He zoomed across the plaza and the rock garden, his wheels spitting up bits of gravel that stung Renee's arms. Racing along behind, Renee saw his friends across the plaza staring at him in wonder and not a little apprehension. He waved to reassure him, though at this moment he could have used some reassurance himself. As Mr. Curtin banged through the door to the Institute control building, it occurred to Renee that every door in the Institute must have been disengaged to be opened in this violent manner. Mr. Curtin clearly would not bear having to wait for a door to open, nor wait for any lagging students, and so Renee hurried on. They passed down a number of door-lined corridors, which must be recruiter corridors and executive suites. At last they came to a plain metal door, whereupon Mr. Curtin stopped so abruptly that Renee, who had expected him to smash it open without slowing, almost ran up to the back of his wheelchair. Now he saw the numeric keypad beside the door. Mr. Curtin kept his office locked. Directing Renee to look away, Mr. Curtin punched the number code. The door slid swiftly open, and Mr. Curtin shot into the office. Renee had to leap forward behind the door as it closed again. Mr. Curtin's office was an oblong, white-stoned room with no windows. It seemed bony and cold, like an empty skull. The bare store floor had not even a rug, and there was a drain in it, perhaps for the sake of cleaning. High on the wall behind Mr. Curtin's desk, in a heavy silver frame, hung an old map of Holland, Mr. Curtin's place of birth, Renee remembered, along with several sketches of Stonetown Harbor and Namasten Island. Beneath the sketches stood a row of locked cabinets, bookshelves, Renee realized, but locked so no one could get at the books. Mr. Curtin's desk, a dull, polished, Spartan metal affair, was carefully organized with file boxes and short stacks of paper. On one corner of the desk sat an artificial violet in a pot. The flower looked perfectly real, was in excellent condition, and unlike Mr. Benedict's live violet, required no care. How strangely similar the two men were, Renee thought, and yet how utterly different. Mr. Curtin motioned for Renee to sit across the desk from him, then set his large black book upon his desk. It was clearly an old book, with a binding that had been mended more than once, and with several pages dog-eared throughout. The book fell open to a place Mr. Curtin had marked with a paperclip, and Renee saw the pages were covered with handwriting. It was a journal. Mr. Curtin was drumming his fingers on the desk and regarding Renee in silence. It suddenly occurred to Renee that perhaps he expected to speak. Did you want to show me something in that book? Mr. Curtin frowned. This book? Certainly not. He reached forward and snapped the journal close. I was only collecting my thoughts, Renard. Tell me, what do you think of my map? I saw you looking at it as we entered. Your map of Holland, sir? Quite lovely. Isn't it, though? Mr. Curtin said, his tone shifting to fondness. I was born in Holland, you see, an orphan like yourself. I spent my childhood there, too. And a terrible childhood it was. Taunted and bullied, ridiculed and abused by other children. I don't miss my childhood, but I do on occasion miss Holland, a country with an admirable tradition. If you don't mind my asking, sir, why did the other children torment you? I do mind you asking, Mr. Curtin said coldly. But then he collected himself and said in a friendlier tone, we both know you've had similar experiences, do we not, Renard, for being different? Renee hesitated and then nodded. People are capable of great wickedness, Renard. They cause each other such misery. This is why I'm particularly proud of my work. Despite having been persecuted myself, my chief goal in life is to bring happiness to all. He smiled a tight smile, a smile that gave Renee the feeling that Mr. Curtin half believed what he said, but also that something else, something much larger and darker, lay beneath. All right, we'll stop right there.